Okay, big thing we're going to learn about in Adobe Camera Raw. We're going to talk about adjustment brushes, graduated filters, and the radial filter. These allow us, instead of making global only adjustments, to making local adjustments. So let's check it out. Okay, so here I've got two images that I want to just showcase a couple things. First is I want to talk about the graduated filter. Okay, tool. But before I do it, let's just talk about what is a global adjustment. Global adjustment is like when I come into my basic editing tab here and I adjust exposure, the sky gets brighter when I increase exposure, the shadows get brighter. Now in this case, it's a little tough, right? Because the foreground is definitely too dark. It's a sunset picture I recently took. The sky's quite nice, maybe on a little bit bright side up in here. We need to even this out, right? A lot of times our natural lighting is not as even as we want it to be. So let's just make a couple adjustments here. These are global adjustments again. I might take down some of my whites, increase my shadows a little bit, pull my blacks down just a little bit to kind of maybe add a little contrast, like that. And so that's better, but it's almost like the sky maybe is a little bit too bright. Now I can pull, so we can do a lot of balancing here, maybe not quite as much as I would like. And so what could I do? Well, let's check out this graduated filter tool. So the way the graduated filter tool works is you have these two dots here, and one is where's your effect starts and one is where it ends. So or when one is where it starts, one is where it's at full power. So in this case, for the sky, I would most likely want it to get, I'm going to darken it a little bit, especially towards the top. So I'm going to pull down my exposure, and you can see how this is making the sky a little bit darker. We're just doing this across a gradient, right? So if I bring my gradient close here, everything above is already at full power, and the gradient goes from full power down to 0 power, right? So if I increase this gradient, the effect is like kind of intense over a very short period, right? So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to do that. If I look at my overlay, I can turn that off. And you can see it's kind of this, it's still fuzzy, but it looks odd. So we normally are going to distribute this over a little bit, and I can move this whole thing around. I can rotate it, right, vertically if I need to, or at an angle. Although probably horizontal for a landscape is probably going to be the most common, but allows me to adjust this. And then of course I could also add some, there's a lot of things that I can control here, very similar to the regular edit, the basic editing tab, right? But I even have some saturation I can adjust. If I wanted to a little bit more color, a little less color, I could add a color. I could even add a color adjustment, which usually is not going to work out too well, but we can see if that would be good or not. This really kind of adds a hue, so probably not a great idea. Anyway, lots of possibilities. This is help. Now if I want to create an additional one, all I need to do is just kind of come into another part of the image and click. So in this case here, I may want to actually brighten this up. Now, this would be brightening. And now the problem I start to run into here a little bit is that I'm not so interested in brightening my roadway, but I would like to brighten this area a lot more. So I could pull this in, and that would help for sure. And it's also pretty intense, so I might do something like this, but the problem is it's really not affecting this area that I want. So a whole nother tool might be the best approach, or I could turn this upside down, bring it here, and then I can use that to sort of be an inverted gradient. So my fields are brighter than down here. Now, this is a little too much, but I could pull this down a little bit. And we start to get in the vicinity of these being a whole lot more even, right? And then at this point, I might choose to go back to my editing, original basic editing features, and I might choose to change this up a little bit. Maybe I don't need to have this quite as much. I have a little bit more contrast. Shadows a little bit, but now we start to get to this overall effect that's pretty terrific. I might want to increase my vibrance a little bit. I don't know, but anyway, that is the use of the graduated filter. Now there's another tool that I'd like to show you. One is the radial tool. This is pretty easy. It's kind of silly, but I go ahead and show it to you. But if you ever wanted to create an effect that was circular based, like let's just say for some strange reason you wanted to kind of create an oval like this in your image to make a version of a vignette. So I could kind of make it nice, pretty big like this, and I could decrease my exposure, and I can turn the overlay off just to get that effect. And so now I've created this kind of vignette like this in a very simple way. This is also a good opportunity to kind of show you the effect of what feathering does in the program. So if I increase my feathering, it gets more blended as I go from like inside to outside of this radial kind of oval shape. But if I decrease my feather all the way down and I turn this off, you can kind of see what the effect is. Now this is, I think, is like very obvious and silly, but perhaps in some isolated situation, having this kind of cutout would be good. Although it's not 100% crisp here. If you wanted to 100% crisp oval, you probably end up needing to do something like this in Photoshop. There is an invert button though. You can invert the effect if you, for some reason, want to. So, but the feather feature allows for a possibility of how you might want to use this as a vignette. So, now the last tool that I'd like to show you is the adjustment brush tool, which is here. And the adjustment brush is probably the main course, and what I find is the most useful method in Adobe Camera Raw of you making localized adjustments, and once you've made your global adjustments. So let me come in here quickly and make some adjustments to this image. So increase this a little bit, pull down my highlights some to and my whites to get back a little bit of detail in this lighting effect. Increase my shadows a little bit, give myself a little bit more oomph. Perhaps decrease the blacks a teeny bit, increase my clarity just a little bit, increase my contrast amongst textures that are close to each other. I might just pull my saturation just a little bit. And now I'm kind of in a pretty good server, but I'd like to do some touch-up adjustments. You know, maybe I can make these silos a little bit brighter. Might want to do something more energetic with the sky if I can figure out how, and some other areas, maybe in the foreground. So let's go over to the adjustment brush. The adjustment brush is the controls are very similar to the regular edit, basic edit features. I can open up this thing that says size, which has got to do with my brush size. So you can see that up appearing here. Again, you can use your bracket keys left and right next to the P key to increase the size. But if you want more control, you can click this down arrow, and then you're also going to get a feather amount. And I'm going to take my feather down about halfway. Flow is how much is kind of coming out of your brush at a time. Flow and density are kind of interrelated. So if you don't want density, is kind of like opacity. Flow is kind of like how fast it comes out of your brush. A way to visualize that is to keep your mask options on. So as you paint, you can kind of see how it paints out, right? And if I turn down my feather, you can also see how much harder the brush is. If I change my flow up to 100, you can sort of see that. And then, sorry, then let's make the flow down to 0. Nothing comes out at 0, maybe in the 30s. You can see the difference. It's very similar, actually. I think density, though, is going to affect how intense that is, how opaque it is, and you can build up in that density over time if you keep working on it. Or you could bring it up to 100% and have it be brighter all the way, right? So just some different ways of kind of visualizing all that. That was all on one brush layer. I just hit delete, went away. But let's come in here again and maybe start around something like on this nature. And let's first work just on this silos a little bit. So I'm going to increase my exposure just a little bit or so I can see this. And I'll work on here. And this is helpful because you can really kind of see the edges of your mask if you want to focus more on your mask. If you don't like the mask, you can turn that off. You can just focus on the effect. And as you paint it on, you can kind of see what's going on there. Okay, and then you can come in and kind of dial this up or back. Want to point out something. If you kind of go overboard a little bit, like whoops, you can see the effect is also impacting my sky. You can massage this. You can reverse it. You don't have to just delete it and start over. What you can do is you can use the erase. Okay, erase from selected adjustment. So what that's going to do is it changes some things automatically. It's usually the feathering is pretty low, although I like to bump it up a bit. Make this a little smaller. But what I can do is I can come back around here and try to work this out. So now what I generally find is that you don't want a really sharp edged brush when you're doing most things. If you feather it more, you tend to blend things, but you can overdo it in here. And when you overdo it, you can get some of those, you kind of get that halo outline or glow effect, which we basically want to blend things so we can't notice it, so people don't see our obvious editing, right? So here we go. Let's turn that off again so we can kind of see what this looks like. You can see I'm not perfect in here in my mask, but it's not too bad. And what I would suggest is I would go back into this and I would probably take off a little bit more in some of these spots here where I'm still haloing a little bit. And frankly, if I go a little bit on the inside, that'd be better than going a little bit on the outside, since I'm brightening this darker shape up. So remember, you can always get it closer if you need to. Yeah, so I've affected that. Now, what I like to do is go to I can make a new brush layer by clicking the plus circle, and like back in here, if I wanted to brighten this up a little bit. Start maybe here, just come in here and I can click and drag. If I want to see that mask, I can, right? And definitely making an impact there. I might do some shadow work a little bit, right? Just to fill that in just a little bit. And again, If I'm worried, I can go over to my erase. The quick tool to use that is hold down the Option key, and I could come down here and just make sure I'm not getting too high into my skyline. And then we'll do one more. We'll do something here in the foreground. Just add a little bit of a exposure bump, highlight bump, and bring my blacks down, just trying to make this even a little bit more. You can really see the effect of that, right? So if it's a little too strong, I can kind of pull it back. And what's wonderful about all these tools is A, they're non-destructive. This is all just a preview. I'm not doing anything to the original capture here. And B, I can edit this dynamically, do something here, adjust my sliders, go back, add a little bit if I wanted into a couple of these spots, make a couple little more highlights in here, get really precise if I wanted to, come back and I could do a whole nother brush and just do these kind of darker little spots. If I wanted to really feather this out, make it soft, I might be able to do that, like that. Okay, and might even be able to, another thing I can do is I can pull this back even just make it a little bit and not so obvious there, right? So really kind of finesse it. And now you can look at all of these mask options and you can really see the effect. And then if you want to just turn all of that off, you can see before and after kind of what I did, okay? And so I could continue to do probably even more in the sky here, but I think you get the idea and you understand that you can use these masks, you can amend them. There's one more really cool thing maybe that I should show you that is a newer tool, and that if I use the graduated filter tool in here, I can kind of combine graduated filter and brush tool into one. So if I wanted to do something kind of more intense in the sky, like maybe, I don't know, like kind of have a graduated filter like this, and maybe I could, so I gotta be careful because like what I'm affecting now is like the bottom half, right? I kind of don't want to do that. So I really should delete this and I should pull from the opposite direction. And now I will, I'm gonna just reset everything here by like this. But I've got this, let's see if we can darken this a little bit. Makes sense with the night sky that the horizon line is going to be brighter than the upper sky most of the time, right? So that's kind of what I'm shooting for a little bit here. But I don't really want to affect all of this area. So what I can do is, now that I've made kind of an initial adjustment, and I might try to pull some detail out of this. The haze is a little wild. Sometimes this doesn't work that well, but we'll go there. But if I don't want this affecting over here, remember I can kind of turn this off and you can see it's definitely darkening my silo a little bit. What I can do is I can click on, sorry, I have to reactivate this, and I can click on the brush here. And I can come in and I'm in this case, I'm going to turn my mask on so I can see it. And I'm going to go to I'm not going to do the brush, but so much the erase tool here. And I'm going to erase this effect. Oops. In here. So it's not affecting this area as much. Okay. So you can see I'm really getting rid of that white mask. And if it's ever a problem, you don't like the color of the mask, you can come in and click by it and you can just change it, right? So if I wanted to make it red, often people make things red, or cyan, but red will be helpful here so I can kind of see where it's not. And I have a lot of feather there, so I might want to go back in and add a little bit. But it's kind of intense, isn't it? So it can be a little hard to, well, see, I have to be a little careful, right? Because when I'm coming back onto this, it's the problem of this is a gradient here. And so if I overdo it, so one of the things I can do is come way down to my flow, even further probably. So just kind of trying to finesse this back on just a little bit. Yeah. And pull my flow down a whole lot here, and I can just kind of try to come in here a little bit, try to finesse that. Yeah, so I'm liking that better. And I think as far as the way that that looks, you can kind of see, kind of darken my upper sky just a little bit. And I think it's looking pretty good. So thanks for watching.